This is episode 77 of Our Town with Troy By. Please hit that like button, hit the notification bell, rate the show, whatever platform you're on. If you don't mind just taking a moment and giving us a follow, giving us a thumbs up, whatever it may be, please do those things. Really appreciate your support. Keith Overholt, the CEO of Downtown Rescue Mission, has just left the studio. We had an awesome conversation. I'm going to break the episode up into two parts. You're going to enjoy the conversation. It touches on the homeless, and there's a law that has been recently passed in Alabama that makes panhandling illegal. I think you'll find his comments on that interesting. We also talk about how they get their funding and what they do with their donations. We talk about the thrift stores, which are a huge part of how they can do what they do. It's a really cool organization. It's large, and you're going to hear about the history and how they have grown. So really appreciated Keith's time and coming in, and sit back, relax, and enjoy each of the parts. We're up. This is the Our Town with Troy By, and I have the pleasure of introducing Keith Overholt, who is the CEO, just the CEO or the president as well, of Downtown Rescue Mission.
The director, yeah.
Director?
President CEO is good.
President CEO.
Yeah.
And I met you, I think Zane Drost, who works for you, just reached out to me on the website, which is cool. Kind of like, hey, if you want to be on the show or you know someone who should be on the show, reach out. He reached out to me. I went over and took a tour, I think about 2 weeks ago. And it, just went swimmingly well. And I thought, man, I need to have these guys on. I need to and learn more. But the tour was impressive. It was extremely impressive, and it was great to see. It's one thing to get a tour of something where maybe your customers or your consumers aren't there. Like if I took a tour of Target at 2 a.m., there's nobody shopping at 2 a.m.
That's right.
But I was there at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. and people are coming in, or you have a sense of the people that kind of linger and loiter, around the property down there on Evangel Street, in downtown. And so I was duly impressed. I was like, let's have you on the show.
Well,
and
we appreciate that. That's for sure.
And they said, well, you're gonna interview Keith, who is now just a few days removed from knee replacement surgery.
Yeah.
And so how you feeling as you came up those stairs into the studio?
Well, I think you added a couple stairs for me this week, which was great. But going down, if you guys can catch me as I go down the stairs, that'll be the best thing. So no, the stairs were okay. And let me ask you a question. I know you're the one asking me questions, but
no, ask as many as you want.
So what was the one thing that you took away from when you went through the tour?
I think it's how much as a city, and maybe not just Downtown Rescue, and I'll explain this in a minute, how much it is another example of how well the city does, Huntsville does in general, with being a leader in an effort or a cause. Yeah. I've heard that over and over. And let me provide a little context, and then I'll directly answer it. So I've interviewed Jessica Brown from First Stop. I've interviewed Karen Peterson from Wellstone. I've interviewed what mental health plays into those who find themselves unsheltered, right? I've interviewed Rachel Sullivan from Solid Ground Counseling Center. I've interviewed several people who at one point were pregnant and homeless, or in a case, a lady who was homeless and became Miss California later.
Wow.
So these just amazing stories of people that were able to overcome, right? And or the people that helped them along the way, or the community that helped them along the way. I've interviewed plenty of people who have spoke about how Mayor Battle and Mayor Finley and the other leaders in Huntsville have shaped, like Crime Stoppers is a great example. And even Wellstone is an example of, as a community, little by little, we get better at things like, we need to put a full-time police officer at every school. Oh, okay, now you know what? We need to put a full-time mental health professional at every school. You mentioned Roger Kitchen before we went live, and Roger in the NBA and the MLB, they're putting full-time medical professionals on staff with teams, right, to work with athletes. And so you hear this, and it's almost like, is this just rote, like propaganda where you move to Huntsville, like we do everything better than everybody. Like, no, I am somewhat a living proof of I've interviewed people and time again, you hear how, man, Huntsville has done a really good job. The amphitheater, for example, they did a music audit. They hired a company from London, England, to come here and say, hey, we want to be more prolific, if you will, in the arts and music. We want people to take us more seriously. We're 2 hours south of Nashville. We want to have a music scene. What do we need to do? And some recommendations came out, one of which was you need to build an amphitheater, type thing. That'll draw people in. Yeah. Led by Mayor Battle. I interviewed Nadia Nyakasari from RCP. She's Persian, and Mayor Battle signed like Persian Day in Huntsville. So then when I go to the rescue mission, and I also, with our church youth, we had gone to the Manor House just recently to do some service.
They do great work.
Yeah. So you start, I'm like, okay, so as when I went to the rescue mission, I'm asking questions, having been to First Stop, okay, and how do you guys differ? And where's the overlap? I know they're working on trying to, always work on getting grants, whether that's at the state level or the federal level. What about Manor House? What about Publix and Kroger and these big, how did that fit in? And obviously, I was very impressed at the size of your facility, the 2 campuses, just the approach that you all have taken. And I think I really left there with like, man, just another notch in the belt of how Huntsville and everybody that's related to that, and it's not just a person, right? How we really try to smartly approach problems and solve problems and be a leader in addressing those, which is no wonder. I had Chad Emerson on episode 8. If you remember him, he was the CEO of downtown Huntsville. Yeah. And the day before, the news had come out last year that we were the #1 place to live. And he comes in, and it was great. I like this kind of exclusive interview with him. And I think that's another reason. It may not go into the metrics, but maybe dealing with the homeless population, right? Or the services that are there for our public, our fellow Americans, citizens, that might factor into the rankings. But if that makes sense, I know it's kind of a long-winded answer.
No, that's great.
But I just left there thinking, man, just another great example. Yeah. Of how the city does things.
I've lived in 3 cities, and Buffalo, where I was born and raised, and then spent about 3 years in Nashville at the rescue mission there, and then Huntsville for almost the last 25 years. And the interesting thing that I find is that the people here are so wanting to be part of the community, even with helping with those who are homeless. So people that come in and volunteer, or people that shop at our stores, or, they're very engaged. Now, I think a lot of them think, hey, the mission already does a really good job, so I'm going to give them funding to help that. And because a lot of what we do is really just to take care of those who others might not take care of. And so a lot of people depend on the mission in this community. And I think I've said to Mayor Battle in the past, I think the mission's a bright spot for for this community. And the reason that is because when you're in big cities, I just was at a conference in San Diego, and there's homeless folks living in middle-class areas right down the middle of their street. Tents, there's a greenway down the middle of the street, and there's tents in the greenway. And and I've been around the homeless scene for a long time, and it was impressive to me in a negative sense to see that, because it was like, wow, man, the mission here is helping stop that, where people aren't sleeping in somebody's backyard and you can't tell them to leave, or they're sitting in front of a business and they're taking drugs right there or doing whatever. You don't see that very much here. A lot of that is because we have good organizations like Downtown Rescue Mission and some of the other ones that you mentioned too, because we work together to try to help solve that issue.
I was just in Oahu in Hawaii. It was my first trip to Hawaii. And, growing up and watching like the Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy, and they always giving away trips to Hawaii, right? And it was always like this lifelong dream. When am I going to get to Hawaii? When am I going to get there? And the reality is the west side of Oahu has been taken over by the homeless, which is very interesting. It's very different than other cities I've seen with this homeless. But now you're talking about like this destination, right? That all of us have in mind, and the beauty of Hawaii and the whole West Side for miles and miles, like all of the public beach access, right? That is now not used by the public because they have essentially taken over. And it was like it really put that kind of in perspective in a way where it and I'm just talking about the like effect on just the general public, right, when you go there. And obviously there's stories there, and I'm not speaking ill of those people at all. We'll spend a lot of time talking, but like how it just is changing the whole dynamic of an island that's not that big, or it's creating this stigma. Don't go to the West Side, you got to go to the East Side or Waikiki or something, and it's like, oh my goodness. And I've also been to seen it like in Seattle. If you ever, I got tickets to. I was on a business trip. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and someone was like, "Oh, I got a ticket to the Mariners game. You want to go see them?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Like, I don't know how they have a dog in the fight. I'll go watch them. Yeah, I don't know. It was like Mariners and Rangers or something like that. And I walked from my hotel, and I got closer to the stadium. Like, oh my goodness, it was a homeless city. That has been formed there, right? And then you start driving the highways, and they're living in the clover leaves, like anywhere. And I have some articles, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But it's I commend you for. I mean, this is your career, right? Is kind of putting this front and center, and living it day after day.
I don't know if I call it career. I've done it for a long time.
Sure.
For me, everything goes back to my spiritual walk, and so for me, it's a calling. When I was 16, my dad was actually running a rescue mission up in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
And I went down. I just got my driver's license. I'm like, I'm going to go visit my dad. He'll take me out for lunch, right? And
by the way, there's your dad right there.
Oh
no, hold on, right there.
There he is.
There he is.
That's Dad. And look at that good-looking guy.
I see the resemblance.
But I went down there to say, "Hey, Dad, let's go to lunch." And I show up at 11 o'clock, and I knew he'd be hungry. And well, being a mission director, I should have known he was going to take me to the line where everybody else was eating, and we were going to eat with the guys, right? And so that was okay. We're sitting there talking, and I look up, and I see a young guy, a couple years older than me. And again, I'm 16. He maybe is 18 at that time. And I was like, "Man, Dad, I know that guy." Now, I lived in the suburbs of Buffalo, and my dad's like, "You don't know that guy." I said, "No, I know that. That's Joe." And he said, "Well, what do you know about Joe?" He said, "Well," I told my dad, I said, "Listen, me playing sports, he was a soccer guy. I was a football guy, but we played during the same time. So I saw him out there running and doing all this stuff." And I said, "We weren't close, but I knew Joe." And I went up and I said, "Hey, Joe." And it was Joe. He came, sat down with me. We talked for a little while. But that day changed my life forever, because a guy who grew up in a middle-class area, the school that I went to was very middle-class, nice suburbs, a kind of place where at night you're playing flashlight tag, and it used everybody's lawn because you didn't care. Nobody cared that you were out there playing. It was just really a great place.
Everyone's a Bills fan. Everyone's wearing a Bills jersey.
Of course.
In a way, right?
I mean, you got to be a Bills fan.
Yeah.
So when I was done talking to Joe, I kind of broke down to my dad, and I was like, "Dad, if something like that could happen to a guy like Joe." And what Joe told me is, he said, "Listen, I first started drinking a little bit on weekends with my buddies, and then I got into some pot." And he said, "It didn't make enough for me. So I started doing some other things." And he said, "I got in the wrong crowd. My mom and dad, they tried as hard as they could, but I was stealing from them and doing other things, and they finally kicked me out, and I ended up at the mission." I don't know whatever happened to Joe. I wish I did, but because of Joe, it's what I do today. Because if something like that could happen to a guy like Joe that had, silver spoon in your mouth kind of neighborhood, right? But if it could happen to Joe, it could happen to anybody. It could happen to me. I was thinking that at 16 years old, that could be me sitting right there and being where Joe is. And so for me, that changed the rest of my life, because, I was thinking, hey, what do you want to do? Be a engineer or something, but that changed my life, because I thought, I've got to do something to help people like Joe.
Yeah. How often does that? I actually found like a TED Talk. I think it was in Temecula, California, and the guy was doing a presentation on how people end up homeless. And he had this little graphic where it was like, okay, you wake up, and he had these like illustrations, like, you wake up, so there's a person in bed, you eat your breakfast, there's, a picture of a plate of food, you get showered, you drive in your car to work, you go to lunch, you do some more work, you drive home, you go to bed. But what if you total your car? Well, now you got to, now you can't pay your water bill because you had to try to pay for the car, or you can't repair the car, so now you have to use. I shouldn't say the water because let's say you take Uber or Lyft. Yeah, there's these things there, but they cost money.
Yeah,
and now you don't have the money to pay these other bills because you were paying to get to work.
Yeah,
and then ultimately it just kind of devolves into a situation where you find yourself homeless, right? Yeah. Do you find in the people that you interact with and what you know about people's cases, is that the kind of predominant thing? Or a lady had a brain aneurysm. I saw another article, right? She just has an aneurysm. And, she had a 20-year career in California. And the next thing you know, that she got addicted to the painkillers. And it's just this thing. Is that the highest percentage of folks that just have this kind of a bad break, and then they just can't overcome that, and it leads them to coming into the rescue mission?
I would say, being the majority, what I would say is that things like that lead them to other things. Addictions, probably about 50% of the people that come to us, whether it's alcohol or drugs or even pornography, it's a slippery slope. I mean, then we have about 40% of our population that is very mentally ill. And I'm a Reagan fan. I liked when he was president. But one of the things I didn't like is that during his term, they pushed all the people out of the mental health facilities. They used to have places for them to be, homes and things like that. And they pushed them out and put them just out on the street, kind of. And so where were they going to go? Well, rescue missions across the country took care of them then, because there was no place for them to go. They were going to become homeless. So not only are we dealing with people that have addictions, but we're dealing with people that have mental illness, and it's a tough thing, because when you're dealing with somebody who one day thinks they're doing this, and the next day they didn't even know you had that conversation with them because they're so mentally ill, it makes it difficult. But I would say for people that are out in the community, if they looked at their own life and said, wow, I've really lived paycheck to paycheck. Most Americans, that's how they do. If you didn't have a paycheck for 1 or 2 weeks, what would happen?
Right.
And that's what happens. Like if it's a major car accident, or if it's something that happened to their house. We've had people that have come just because their house burned down and their insurance wasn't there.
Right.
So there's so many different stories. A lot of people think, well, it's just that bum that's laying under the bridge. No, it's not really. It's your brother, it's your sister, it's a cousin, it's a mom or dad, or it's a son or daughter that's sitting out there that a lot of times it's one check away, one paycheck away. And then they end up at the mission. And they've already, like my friend Joe, he had already gone to his parents a bunch of times, even to the point now he was stealing from them. And they finally said, we can't do it, Joe. We're done. We can't do this anymore. And so it frustrates me sometimes, because I've even experienced it with my family. I have a sister who dealt with homelessness a little bit. And boy, when you have it hit your own family and then you have somebody come say, well, those bums.
Yeah.
No, they're not bums. That's our neighbor. That's our friend. It's somebody that, could have been part of your family. And, I'm happy for the folks that haven't had that touch their life. But for the ones that have, they realize, listen, it's just the person that's next door to me, or the person that stands with me in the line at the grocery store. It's a regular person. Yeah. And most of those folks that come to us have a lot of abilities. I mean, we have a maintenance crew that every one of the guys that's in our maintenance crew, we've got 5 or 6 guys, they're really good at what they do, framing stuff and doing plumbing and HVAC. And, because I hear the words a lot of times too, well, just tell those guys to go out and get a job.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time those guys have had a job and they still end up at the mission. The job's not the problem. Having a job, most of those guys can make more than a lot of my staff that are currently there. But the problem is that they can't break either the addiction or the problems that they have from somebody dying in their life, or
Yeah.
some major issue. There's a lot of folks that we have that have been abused as children. I mean, those are the kind of things that we're dealing with on a daily basis.
Yeah. That, you know what? Let me switch to your website. By the way, so this is the homepage of your website. That is that's a great picture. That just kind of, I don't know, says a lot. You look at the eyes of this gentleman.
Yeah.
And then right away, I think it's what kind of thought went into, what do we put on the homepage? What is that first picture? What's that first message? And in this case, it's give, right? We need your help as a community, right? Give monthly, donate today.
Right.
Is that something as the CEO, this wasn't the question I intended to ask, but I'll ask it anyway, that you changed kind of the first entry point for the public when they come in and they access the website?
Well, Downtown Rescue Mission currently receives no federal, state, or local funding. We're 100% funded by people that give. So one of the messages where we're going to have first up on our screen is, hey, can you help us help this kind of guy? Right. Or this girl that has 2 kids, or, those are the pictures that we're going to put up there, because these are the real people that we're taking care of. And if you want to give, that's great. If not, come out and volunteer, or give us some food that we can, cook for them, or, there's a bunch of ways that they can help. But for us, we've got to promote the give part, because for us, if we don't do that, we can't do all the programs and services that we do.
Right.
And so that's a big thing for us. And you can see on there, I have the updated stats, but
let me go back.
It should have our plate there that has, last year we did 371,000 meals. You know how many restaurants wish they had 371,000 meals? I think that's an average of about 300 per meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. And, for us, I'm an avid fisherman.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I always tell my board is, I want to get the folks that are on the street, because sometimes they're not wanting to come in. But we provide a meal and clean clothes and a shelter to get them in our doors. And really, that's the one step we want them to take. Then after that, we want to share the gospel with them. That's what our point is. We want to share the hole that you have in your life that you're trying to fill with drugs or alcohol. We want to fill with Jesus. And that's really, we find so much success with that, because they're trying to fill that void. And if you don't fill that void, they're going to find something to fill it with.
Yeah.
And so, we had almost 100,000 times that our beds were slept in last year. And we do other things, like we have food bags that we give out to community. Mission is set up that we have overnight guests that come, and then we have our programs that we do. So the programs are set up that you're not forced to be in them. So if you want to come in and just stay in our overnight shelter, you're more than welcome. We will provide clothing and meals and a warm place to stay all the time. Well, not warm right now, a cooler place to stay. But if you want to get in our program, we have up to 100 people, men and women, that are in our program right now. And that's really a 1-year program that goes through a faith-based look on how to change your life. And we take them from early Christianity all the way through advanced prayer life and things like that. But there's also how to find a job and how to do a resume, and all that stuff is in there as well. But if they graduate our program, it's 74% success rate of them being at least 2 to 3 years past the mission and not being homeless anymore. And so that's our goal. We want to get people so that we're not enabling them, but we're helping them.
They become self-reliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so let's talk actually a little bit about the campus, and then we'll dive back into the website.
Sure.
But there's a men's side, there's a women's side. As you were saying, anybody can come in and receive services. I met the man who, I think he's got it down to, like, he can do 50 pounds in a bag. Like, anybody can walk up and get food.
Yeah.
Can't remember his name.
Neil?
Neil. It might have been Neil.
Yeah.
And that pantry that he was pulling from, I think, will only stay stocked maybe a week and a half at most. So it's just, it goes to show you, okay, the shelves are full.
Yeah.
But what an effort to restock the shelves and refill them, right? Where it's just that constant cycle of need that you all have right on the community.
Oh, yeah. And we want to also make it so that folks don't have to come to us.
Right.
I mean, if they're that one paycheck away, what can we do to help with that? Now, I'm not going to give them money. That's not what the mission does. We're not there to supply. There are some places out there that will help them with their utility bill and things like that. But hey, if you have food that you don't have to pay for this month, maybe you'll be able to pay for your rent. And
Right.
we're trying to keep them from having to come to the mission. And then all those other services we provide are for folks that actually do need our services.
So what is it? Let's just use a man as an example. A man comes in. What is the in processing process like? What are those steps of vetting or whatever that a man would go through is if he just walked onto your campus and said, "Hey, I need help"?
Yeah. So when they come in, if they've never been with us before, we ask them to go to see one of our chaplains or counselors, and that counselor sit down and say, "Hey, how long have you been homeless?" We ask nationalities, things like that. We try to collect a database so that we can share it with our community, also with the country, to say, "Hey, this is really where we're at."
Mm-hmm.
And so then he fills out some paperwork. There's a couple things that we have them sign. They have to have issued ID. And the reason why we have to have that at the mission is because, as you saw on the tour, 100 feet away are moms and kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't take in sex offenders right now. And that's something that I think our community is going to have to look at in the future, because some of the things that are going on in those camps are mostly sex offenders that there's nowhere else for them to go. And people are like, well, why doesn't the mission take them in? Well, that's one thing that we can't do. We can't take somebody in that has a sex registry, that they're on the registry. So, but yeah, once they sign that in and they've got their first time in, they set up a time to have counseling with the chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, they get whatever food during the times that we serve them, or if they want a bunk at night, or if they, whatever services they need. If they need clothing that day, if they come in and they're all tattered and we take them off, we have them take their clothes off and they can go pick out some new clothes for the day. And they can, I think it's 3 to 4 times a month, they can come and get new clothes if they like. So it's a big thing for us because, the folks that come in, a lot of them don't want to come to a mission.
Yeah.
So we want to make it as welcoming as possible. Say, hey, what can we do for you to be, I want the friendliest guy to be my chaplain that says, hey, it's okay. I know it took a lot for you to come here, but it's okay. This is a good place, and we love for you to stay here with us. If you need our services, please come and stay with us.
Gotcha. And how many men do you have right now?
Oh, let's see. Number-wise, we're averaging about 278 people a night. 40% of that would be women and children, and the rest would be men.
Okay. And the women's campus was built. So originally it was what, the Westminster Christian Academy?
It was, yeah.
And now it's for your use. And I believe the original facility is now what's being used as the men's side, and you built a women's and children's side, correct?
We did, yeah.
And when was that finished?
That was finished in 2018. And what had happened, we moved from a campus location on the other side of town. We were on 9th Avenue before.
Okay.
And so in 2007, 2008, the city said, hey, we're going to put a road in that area, and we're going to need the mission to move. And so we were a little shocked by that because, the NIMBY principle, which is not in my backyard, a lot of folks probably don't want a rescue mission in your backyard. But when we did that, we said, listen, when we come, we're going to be a good neighbor. And how we're going to do that, if you notice when you drove in, you had to go through a guard check to make sure you can come in. That's for your safety, but also for the safety of the folks that stay with us. There's a lot of the moms who come to us that have been abused or have a spouse or a boyfriend, sometimes even girlfriends that are abusive, and we want to make sure that they're not having to deal with that. So in 2007, 2008, we moved the whole mission campus, which was our women's and children's ministries as well. And they were all in that original building that you came and saw. The first part of the tour was that building. In about 2014, I came to the board and said, listen, I go home every night and pray, Lord, I hope nothing happens to the moms and kids that are staying with us, because they were only one metal breaker bar away from getting into the women's side. And it was okay. They were safe. But, every night I thought, Lord, we just please, no incidents happen. And I also knew once we were going to go down that path, I knew more moms and kids would come stay with us, because a lot wouldn't come stay with us if they have to stay in the same building where the men were. So in 2016, we did a capital campaign. We raised about $7.1 million from our community and cost about $7.4 million. And so pretty much even Stephen there, we were able to build that building, really nice building that we were able to take care of the moms and the moms with kids. I'm sorry, the women and then the moms with kids. Interesting. It's only been 5 years and we're already talking about having to expand it. I had a board member say, well, you're building this building twice the size of our current capacity of what we want to do. And I said, well, I said, in 2-3 years, watch, it'll be full. 6 months, we were full.
Wow.
So, and he said, well, how much more can we do? How much is too big? And I said, well, for me, it's a prayer thing. I go to the Lord and say, listen, how much more do we need? Is there somebody else in the community that can do this?
Mm-hmm.
I feel we do a good job at it. So I said, whatever we need to do. So part of what we're looking at now is even expanding some of those ministries, because 6 months after we were in there, we were already full.
Is the expansion in part for? Are there women that don't want to come because they are worried about commingling with the men and worried about their own safety? And then that's built, and then the word kind of spreads in a way like, no, hey, it's actually a very safe place, and it's almost like they're doing the promotion for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, when we built the Women and Children's Facility, what happens is there's a lot of moms out there or women who have dealt with abuse.
Yeah,
and they're doing things that they probably wouldn't do, but for necessity. Moms are not going to let their kids be out in the street.
Mm-hmm.
They'll find a car, they'll find a buddy, that they'll let them in their house. Probably not a good situation. So I wasn't surprised that after 6 months we were full, because a lot of those folks started coming to us because they're like, wow, you built a new building. We're no longer part of the men's facility anymore, and we have a safe place to stay. So, like I said, our moms and kids and our single women's areas exploded after that, because once they saw, hey, you have a separate building, but there was no fear anymore.
Yeah.
And like you said, it gets out in the street. Hey, if you need help, go down to the Downtown Rescue Mission.
Yeah.
If you're a mom with some kids, they'll take care of you.
Talk about, if you could, when I was there, I noticed there's points in time where the children must be with their mother on that side, and then there's times where there can be a little bit of a separation, and there was a particular room, for example, where a mother can kind of sit and lounge, and then the TV is always on, so that children can, I guess, kind of take a break from one another, but at the same time, what are those rules on never leaving, having them out of their sight or out of their control?
Yeah, so we want the moms to have responsibility for their children. Just because you're at a rescue mission doesn't mean you can throw your hands up and say, hey, I don't need to take care of my kids anymore. Mm-hmm. Part of that is the training for us. Some of these ladies that are coming are young girls who have never been a parent before. We want to help them with that. But we make it easier for them because we do have the things set up, like there's a playground in the back that they can go play on. And as long as the mom's in that area, she doesn't have to worry about them because they're in it's a nice closed-in area that nobody can get to. But, we also have times, let me just say this. We worked out with the Huntsville school system that every morning, the first pickup they do is the kids at the mission. So they all go to regular school. So if they were in a certain district, the Huntsville City will have to take them to that district. So there's a couple big yellow buses that pull in, and they'll load up from some of our kids. Interesting thing is they're the first pickup in the morning and the last pickup at night.
Right.
Why do you think we did that?
So nobody knows, right?
Nobody knows.
That's right.
Real quick story, side note. So I had a development lady who was working for me probably 6-7 years ago, and we're very quiet about not saying who's there, and especially with the kids, we don't want to ever embarrass them or anything like that. So she's walking down the hallways of the school. It's just across the street there, right in front of UAH. And she hears, Miss Lisa, Miss Lisa. Mm-hmm. And this kid comes running down, grabs her leg, gives her a big hug, and he goes, this is Miss Lisa, and she's at the rescue mission, and that's where I stay. It's a place, it's almost like heaven, and
oh, wow.
So she almost got tears in her eyes because she's like, here I'm trying to keep it quiet. And he was so proud that he lived at the mission, and so, but we do make it so it's very private for them, that they, when they're coming in, that they're not worried about some other kids picking them with all the bullying that goes on these days. I don't want that to be one more thing that kid has to worry about.
Yeah.
So I love our partnership that we do with Huntsville City Schools, because they do take care of our folks that when they come in, the kids are immediately put in a school within a week. They're in a school district, and they're not missing out on any school. And so why I brought that up is that separates the moms. Most of the kids that come with us are from age 4 to 12, 13 years old. And those kids, they'll go to school every day as long as their mom's staying at our campus. They'll go to the Huntsville City School District, pick them up in a big yellow bus.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What are things you mentioned a little bit earlier? This is not a place where someone's going to come in and just get a check.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you don't provide? Or give us an idea again of kind of that overall what's out of scope and out of the domain of what you would provide an individual.
Well, it's funny because I said that about the finances, but we do have grants that we give to the people who go through our program. And if they have, like at the end of the semester, if they graduate, they can apply for a grant that is through the mission and maybe get up to $1,000 towards a car or $1,500 down on their first apartment, those kind of things. So we do have some of that is out there, but we really try to look at, are we enabling or are we helping?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're enabling, we're probably not going to do that. We're going to move away from that. If somebody else in the community wants to do that, that's fine. Or if we're duplicating services, and I'll give a quick example of this. A few years ago, we had been doing a Christmas party for the community kids for a long time. And we'd have 200-300 kids show up. We'd have guy doing magic, and give them pizza, and they'd do crafts, and it was a big day. Well, my staff kept coming to me and say, listen, we're really duplicating services. Most of these kids were over at this other one and already were getting these gifts. And we found that, some of it was that, we were not checking. We didn't check, make sure we were duplicating services on that. And so we just decided a few years back and said, listen, we're going to have Christmas for our kids that stay at the mission, but not have the outreach to the community anymore, because everybody does it at that time of the year. So that's one thing that we don't have to do, because so many are doing it. The Marines do it. You got, Salvation Army has some things they do for the kids. I mean, everybody has a Christmas party for the community. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things, that's just an example of something that we backed away from because it was already being done so much.
Okay. Let me show that. I want to show the testimony of, I think her name is Jessica. And I think this hits on, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, and let me switch to that. If you can see it better there, you can see it. But she says, hello, my name is Jessica, and this is my testimony. By the way, I like how these are updated. There's one that's just from July 18th of the 3 that are on the thing now, right?
Yep.
I think that's incredible. I lost my mother 3 years ago. My father died 5 years before that. So in a short period of time, I experienced a lot of loss. You touched on that earlier, just sometimes of what are those things that certain people can't overcome that.
Yeah.
They don't have the right perspective, right, on life and death, and it's crippling, yeah. Right? My mother died due to a drug overdose. So gives you a little bit of insight in what kind of world she grew up in, yeah. Right? And I also suffer from substance abuse. So believing I had lost everything, I spiraled into my addiction further and further. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't miss my family. My mother was a rock, even though we both had an addiction. When life would throw me a curveball, she would always be there to help me. Let me skip down. No, I'm not going to skip down. Having also been abused in my lifetime physically, sexually, and mentally has played a big part in me not feeling good about myself. You touched on that as well. Many of these people come from abusive situations, yeah. And it seems like, unfortunately, she hit the trifecta there. But even through it all, everything I suffered didn't make me weaker in spirit. It has made me a stronger person. In the past 6 months, I've drawn closer to my 2 children. William, my son, has made me a grandmother and a proud one. I am truly blessed. My daughter, Jasmine, makes me so proud of her. Jasmine is so beautiful in all her ways. And then it gets even, now we really get to the heart of your mission here, right? I feel closer to God since all of these blessings have shown up in my life. There's a feeling God has made me stronger in my world of chaos. We can't take back time that we missed out on, but we can start fresh and move on to better memories with those that we love. So I'm assuming there's no matter what their religious affiliation, but you're going to help them with understanding like faith and hope and self-worth and that kind of stuff, right? When they enter your program.
I don't care what ethnic background you come from. I don't care what you may have been the richest family in the community. You may have been the poorest family. I don't care. We just want to help whoever's out there that needs help. And when somebody like Jessica comes in and says, "Hey, it's been generational," it was my mom and maybe the mom before that, maybe my grandmother even was. Our goal is to break that cycle. We want the next generation to never know what a homeless shelter was. We had a kid a few months back that was being talked to by one of our case managers, and they said, "Hey, what do you want to do when you get older?" And she said, "I would love to go and be a ballerina. But before I do that, I have to spend time in prison, then I'll go out and do it." Well, why she said that is because that was what happened with her mom and her mom before that. All she knew was that your career started after you go to prison. We want to stop that. I don't want her to have to experience that. So all she had known in her life at 6 or 7 years old was, you know what? My life starts after I serve my first sentence. Then I can figure out what I want to do.
Wow.
No, let's stop that. Let's not make that about. Let's make this a new direction, a new family tree for those folks. And that's what's exciting for us because we get to see that we're changing not just their heart, but we're seeing a generational change that for a long time there's been this family that's been going down this path. It's a new path they're going down. I love that.
Are there any that don't want to come to the mission because it is a faith-based, faith-centered, Christ-centered mission?
Yeah, I'm sure. But the food and shelter we provide is for everybody.
Yeah.
The programs that we provide are for folks who want to, we don't say they can't come in because they're Muslim into our program or, if they're some other religion, that we don't care. If they want to join our program, they're going to know it's a Bible-based program.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've had some that say, "Well, I don't want to join the program." Then you're more than welcome not to join the program. That's it. It's not prison or jail that you have to go through our program. You have to sign up. It's free will for you to sign up for our program. But for our sheltering services, our emergency side, it doesn't matter what your religious background is. You can be atheist. You can worship the devil. But you're still able to come because I said to my staff all the time, my goal is I don't want to see anybody dying on the street because they had nowhere else to go. And that happens in the United States all the time. The greatest country ever, and we have people dying because they had no place to go.
Yeah.
So I want them to know that they're welcome no matter what skin color they have or what religious background they have. It doesn't even matter what economic background they have. Come be at the mission if you need our help.
Yeah. I like that thing you posted on Facebook the other day. It was like this list of things like there's only one race, human race. There's only one blood type. It's red.
Yeah.
Just we get so fixated on diving into these other things. Like, no, come on. We all come from the same God, right?
Yeah. And I think we're separated on purpose. I mean, I'm a Bills fan, right? I mean, so I don't like your Redskins. I mean,
know.
So.
But we all love DeMar Hamlin.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But you see, when that happened, everybody came around him. And how many people said they prayed for the first time ever?
Right.
That's
true.
And it didn't matter what religion they were. They were praying for DeMar because they knew that was something the country needed to come together for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yeah, for me, it's listen, when they are coming into our program, my belief and the mission's belief is that we really think that we're going to serve them the best by telling them that Jesus Christ is the way out of that situation in your life. And if you don't want to accept that, that's okay. We had a gentleman who was very outwardly gay. When he came in the program, I said, "Listen, I think I was born gay." And we said, "Okay." And he said, "But I want to join your program. Is that okay?" "Sure, come on in the program." We don't preach down at people. We don't, there's none of that going on. We just teach the lessons as we go through them. And he came to my senior pastor at the mission and said, "Listen, Brother Walker, I've really been looking at the word." And he said, I truly believe that I was born gay, but I want to follow the path that Jesus wants me to follow. And he said, if I am gay, maybe I just need to be celibate because that's what the Bible's telling me that if I have that persuasion or I was born that way, that this is what I need to do. And so that was not from somebody preaching down at him or saying you're a bad person. It was because we let him into our program, no matter what background you have again, right? And said, hey, listen, this is something that you're going to learn on your own. No, that doesn't mean everybody that comes in the program who is gay, which we do have people that come in our program that are gay, says, you know what, I need to change my lifestyle now because you guys have taught these different things. Not everybody does. That's okay.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm commissioned by the Bible for us to go out and do these things. Matthew 28 says, go out and make sure you're helping people come to know the Lord, right? And so that's the whole goal of the mission. The mission is really there for that one purpose. The shelter, the food, the clothing, the programs, that's all a byproduct that we want them to hear about Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Do you are you a pastor or minister on Sundays? Or?
I'm not.
Okay.
No, I am ordained as a deacon, but I'm not a pastor.
You probably get a full time. You get enough of what that might be like throughout the week, right? And what you do and what you preach on behalf of the mission or for the mission. Right?
And here's the thing: I don't think you have to be ordained to be able to share the gospel with somebody.
No.
So that's the point. I even say with my staff: listen, your background, but if might not have that you are a pastor or gone to Bible school or. And I said, listen, if you have the heart to share with them what you believe in your heart, that's all we need. And so that's a big byproduct for what we do with our staff is say, listen, I want you to feel called to come work here. That calling isn't for Keith to come and say, hey, Joe, you need to be called. This is for God to say, I'm called to be at the mission. And we have a long-term staff. And the reason they're long-term is because they love what we do about sharing the gospel. And we're not ashamed about doing that.
Let's touch on the funding for a second. And I want to pull this up. And because you said you don't receive any state or federal funds,
right?
And I'm sorry for the hat thing. I've been looking at buying hats, and you know how they know what you're interested in. So my page gets full of things like this Safari Sun. So you're not listed on here, but there was 8 local agencies that received $300,000, and I think that flowed down from Governor Ivey, right? The state got some money, and Huntsville-based areas got $300,000 of it, like $2.5 million, something like that. And the ones that did get something were Asha, Kiran, Crisis Centers of North Alabama. First Stop was on their New Futures, Wellstone. Why is it that? I guess the question I had until I probably sat here and listened to you say it was, why did you pursue this? Did you write some sort of grant or some appeal to, hey, we need the funding, we want to be a part of this? And if not, then why are you exempt from receiving that?
So since I've been around rescue missions almost 30 years of my life now.
Yeah.
And I know I'm looking old from it, but 30 years is a long time.
You look young, man.
Yeah. My thing is, in the past, and it is now changing, that if you accepted government funding, we couldn't do what we do with sharing the gospel.
Okay.
So
church and state.
Yeah. And so now the interesting thing is that under President Obama and President Trump, they started letting that a little bit more loose with faith-based. It's called the Faith-Based Initiative, where they're allowing some faith-based ministries to be able to accept without red tape to say, hey, listen, you're feeding, you're sheltering, we're going to give you money towards that. So we're looking at those options now, but up until about this last year, we have not because of the red tape.
Okay.
Because, again, the main goal is that we're going to share the gospel. And if they say, hey, you know what, you just received $100,000, you cannot share the gospel anymore, we don't need that money.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I'm just going to throw out this question because it's my program and nobody says I can't.
Yeah. And
I mentioned the same thing to Zane before I really knew the background. Could you... Okay, so the government, right? I've been a federal contractor my whole career, and one day I'll write a book about what it's like to like contract with the government. But if you got together with like a cooperative type thing with all of the other if there are other faith-based organizations like yourselves in Alabama, would the government smile upon like, okay, we're government being state, federal, whatever? You kind of come together and seek a large amount of money, similar to that, where it flows down to you, versus a one-off, where then kind of just from like a transactional standpoint, they wouldn't want to receive 12 requests right? If you came together, has that ever been talked about? Does that seem like an idea that you have also thought about, getting together with all the other ones and seek some sort of pot of money from some group?
Yeah, we very much want to work together with the community at large, especially the agencies that are doing well with what for homeless or just even folks that are looking for housing. I mean, it's not just homeless. That a lot of people think, well, the mission is soup, soap, and salvation for that homeless guy that's under the bridge. It's really not. We have you saw it with the tour. There's so much more that's going on there that I would love for people to come down and take a tour and see what we do. But even that money that you mentioned there, the $300,000 that was going to 8 organizations, I was on a committee through the state where we went down and met with the Attorney General, who was the one that received that money in. A lot of that was from the opioid issue that we got a lawsuit from Alabama. I knew at the end of the day we probably weren't going to get that money, but I was fighting for our community to be able to get some money. So when we were going down there, I talked. I didn't talk directly to the governor, but I said, "Listen, our Huntsville community is dealing with these issues as well, and they need to divide that money up equally between how many people you had coming in. And opioids has been a crazy issue for us, right?
Yeah,
people are addicted. I mean, you snapped your finger." Back 20, 30 years ago, it took a guy 20, 30 years to get drunk, right? I mean, to be an alcoholic. He may be alcoholic first time he drinks it, but it takes about 20, 30 years for it to hurt your life. These young guys, we got 18, 19-year-old guys that there. First time they take opioids, they're down that slippery slope. They're already needing the mission because they can't deal with it, right?
Yeah.
So anyhow, that money was for the opioid issue. I didn't read the article, but I'm pretty sure that's where that was from. But my goal was to get that money to our community, whether it came to the mission or not. The more money that we can have here to help deal with that issue, the better we're going to be as a community. So that I'm pretty sure that $300,000 that came in was part of that opioid money from the government.
Let's talk about Publix, Kroger, right? Some of these big grocers and others that are somewhat national or have a really large regional presence, where I guess it's one thing for you all to go out and seek donors, and I guess it's another where are those big companies like that provide vital services, right, to life, right?
Yeah.
Food and water, right, and food. Is that something where? Let's talk a little bit about where those companies that are kind of regularly donating to you all, whether that's money or just in substance. And then is that something that's easy to tap into sometimes when you have these very large companies, Costco, BJ's, whatever, they're building a BJ's and there's going to be a Sam's Club, where it's just part of their business to give back to the community in which they have, built an operation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So with us, we're very much a part of that whole Kroger, Walmart, sometimes Publix. Most of the time, you get day old cookies or day old bread. It's still good.
Yeah.
I mean, we're get a ton of that stuff. Those partnerships actually help us so we don't have to buy that bread, right? And that's a big thing for us. We have a big gift in kind, is what that's called, where it's not actual cash that they give you, but it's stuff that we use that can be used to give out to people in those food bags, or we use it for lunch because we're serving sandwiches. And but yeah, we are very involved in that. We actually have part of our development department goes out. If there's a new chain coming into our area, we're going to be one of the first ones at the door knocking on their door saying, hey, what can you do? Because we know that you're going to throw away stuff. If you're going to throw it away, you might as well just give it to us. And so we have some great partnerships. If we didn't have those partnerships, we would have to raise a whole lot more money.
But it's incumbent upon you. Let's pick Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Because they're new to Mid-City. I know they're building a new Kroger, but Trader Joe's as a company, it's their first location here.
Yeah.
Is that something where if you have something in place with them, and did you have to knock on their door?
We did, and we knocked on their door. Now, there are some times that these folks come in and they're like, well, let's see where the bigger agencies are, and we'll give it to them. And Mission's fairly good size.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they come to us. But we're also partnering with like Feed America, which is national. And they pull their big semi up into the parking lot of the Mission, and we let the other 30 agencies that help run mission, little ministries and missions out in the community. Come on out and pick out what you need, because that we're trying to help the whole community. It's not just, hey, we're the mission, we're going to take everything in, right?
Yeah.
We want to share it with everybody if they're doing a good job helping folks.
Tell me about what you do with, I have to read this, North Alabama Coalition of the Homeless. Can you talk a little bit about what that organization is and what your involvement is?
Sure. A lot of what they do is they're trying to help this area receive funding. So that's a big portion of what they do. It is a group. They actually have an office at the mission. About a year or two ago, we got together with them and said, well, they came to us and said, hey, we're really not providing help at the current location we're at. Can we be here? A lot of the folks that we help are at the mission already, so we're good with that. But they help with housing. They try to get the whole quorum together of folks that are helping with, whether it's feeding or clothing, or if it's sheltering. They try to get all those people in one room. Some of it is low income rents. So if somebody is already doing it, it's great to have that group that says, hey, let's get together and make sure we can do it, as a community, not as individuals. So they're really there to get those groups together.
So I guess the reason I'm asking that, I want to branch into this category of, you mentioned earlier, you're going to go to conferences. You're probably going to go to like a rescue mission type conference, maybe once a year, twice a year, where you're going to hear from speakers, and this is the industry, right, if you will, that you're in. Right. Share ideas, how people, case studies, how they solve problems. And then you have something like a coalition that does it matter if it's faith-based? We get into the whole church and state thing here, or all of, is that somewhat able to help any group that's trying to provide services?
So
did I miss something in your explanation?
No. Explain what you mean by church and state with that issue.
Well, just as far as when you don't seek federal funding or state funding because you're a faith-based organization, and you try to just rely on donors, right, through your own means. So when you get into the coalition, does that also categorize and segregate in a way from who can receive, their help and their support?
They don't separate us. We separate ourselves on that.
Okay.
And again, that was from the red tape that we knew from the past. Now, I just went to my fundraising team and told them I just came back from a conference in early June and said, listen, the faith-based initiative that the government's working on, we really need to start taking a look at that. If they're not going to have red tape, sure, we're going to take money in, because we're helping more people than anybody else in the community. Why not take it in? But before that, we were sitting at the table because they need our numbers. When you're talking about homeless people in our community, we're sleeping 300 people a night. That's a big portion of the number of people that are staying on the streets. So, yes, we worked alongside them. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes they would get frustrated because, hey, why won't you guys accept some funding? Well, we'd explain, and they didn't understand that. They're like, oh, you don't have to worry about that. No, I do have to worry about that. But I do, our big thing is that we want to make sure this community is getting as much of the pot as possible of that money that's coming in. Because, places like Birmingham, they've got a huge coalition down there, and they're saying, hey, we need the money, right? Well, Huntsville is getting to be about the same size as that area. Well, we do too. And so we always made sure that our numbers were in there. There's a couple audits that are done twice a year where they'll ask us to count our numbers that night. And I always say this about that, at the mission last year, we have a computer program that we have every single person that comes in. We put the Social Security number in. We track them to see how they're doing at the mission or if they go somewhere else. And we served 2,500 people that year in a 12-month period. Now, we only sleep 300 a night, but we had 2,500 people. Well, the survey came out and said we had like 500 to 700 people that were homeless in our area. I don't agree, right? I think that what they could count maybe that night. But when we've seen 2,500 separate individuals with separate Social Security numbers, something's wrong with those counts. And I think we try to do as good as we can with them. But, the criteria, are you really homeless? If you're in a program, you're not. Well, listen, everybody that's at the mission, if they didn't have the mission, would be homeless.
Yeah.
Just because they joined our program doesn't, preclude them from being part of that number, but it does. The government has different things they have set up. So anyhow, like I said, we had 2,500 in our system that came over the last 12 months, and it's amazing to see what the numbers are because it's way different than what we count.
Yeah.